Steve Sherlock here for Franklin Matters, Franklin Public Radio, available anywhere, anytime on the internet in your browser, WFPR.FM, and in the local Franklin Mass FM radio dial. Yeah, the dial, the knob or the push buttons, you can preset 102.9 is the number on the FM band. Here virtually again today with another candidate interview for the biennial election coming up November 4th, 2025. Candidate for school committee, Nadia Mausolf. Nadia, thank you for doing this.
Thanks, Steve. I'm happy for this opportunity. And thank you for taking the time to put all of this together for our community, and getting the information out there. It's so important. I know that a couple years ago, I listened to these interviews and they really helped get to know some of the candidates. I've been listening to some of the interviews thus far, and I'm just happy to have this opportunity.
No, this is what we do. It needs to be done, and I haven't seen anybody else around to do it. The two studio would have liked to, but the volume was just a little bit more than they could handle. So thankfully, Zoom in this case gives me my video editing practice skills some time to really hone the skills there and produce it the way so that at least people can understand what you've got, what the other candidates have, so that we can create that informed voter. So, to the listeners, if you're new to this, thank you for coming in. If you've seen some of the others, you're probably familiar. Each candidate has seen the questions before. There's no tricks. There's no need to be. We're looking to have a conversation to share the information they're bringing to the table for a volunteer position, like mine is a volunteer position. Same three questions go across all the candidates, and then we have specific to school committee, town council, and planning board because those areas have unique challenges. All of this is intended to be done within the week as we record this because early voting starts October 17th, that Friday, and runs through the Friday, I believe, just before November 4th, when people have their final chance to vote on that Tuesday, November 4th, at the high school from 6 a.m. through 8 p.m. I also just heard through the town clerk that the ballots have actually arrived, so anybody who requested a mail ballot should also be getting it in the next day or so, and then they can start turning it around. So, that much said, we'll start at the beginning. So, Nadia, for the people who don't know, and we're all neighbors, but some of us are closer than others. What's your Franklin story or your life here in Franklin and community involvement?
Yeah, so my story, my husband and I moved to Franklin in spring of 2013. We had actually just moved back from living abroad for a couple of years.
Mm,
Um, so we were really anxious to sort of settle down, find a home, start our family. Um, I'm originally from Newton. My husband's from Maryland. We sort of lived around the Boston area for several years after college. Um, but looking for a community to sort of settle down in, we originally were trying to sort of stay around the Newton area. I come from a very strong Italian family,
hmm
and wanting to start a family, we were hoping to stay close by, but knowing what the real estate values were looking like, we quickly expanded our search. I also have a close family in Franklin, so I was familiar with the community. Um, we found our home and really fell in love with it and sort of started weighing out those pros and cons, right? So we had that low interest rate of 2013
hmm
for us, thankfully. But there was also the Franklin's low tax rate, the commuter rail. My husband was working in Boston at the time, so that was essential. Um, and most importantly for me was the schools,
hmm
the reputation for the public schools. I grew up in the 80s and 90s going to Newton Public Schools. At the time, those were ranked, highest in the state, one of the highest districts in the state. So just realizing the opportunities that opened up for me, and having a sort of solid primary school education, I really
hmm
wanted my kids. Um, so I also, as a child, my grandmother and my parents would take us to the Feast of San Rocco, which was such a great tradition, and
hmm
the festival in Newton that's held every year, an Italian festival. And so I just thought that was, I really appreciated that sort of consistent tradition that I was familiar with growing up. So that was a plus. Um, once we moved here, my husband was working in Boston at the time. I was unemployed. Again, we had just come back from living abroad and was anxious to sort of get involved with the community, networking. So I joined the Franklin Newcomers Club, and made,
Mm,
some initial connections there, still in touch with some of them. A year later, I had my daughter, and joined the local Franklin Moms Club. I ended up being co-president of that for a stint, and that again met a bunch of really great families. Um, was really starting to plant roots in the community. And then when my daughter started kindergarten, I think that was sort of my draw into the whole town political school theme. That was let's see, 2018. So 7 months later, COVID hit.
hmm
So it was definitely a challenging couple of years. I remember you can actually hear the high school football stadium from my house, and I remember hearing the town council meeting going on, and you know, just hearing the tension going on between the
hmm
community and the schools. And I said to myself, I really better pay attention and start listening in. On top of that, there was all this redistricting discussions going on,
hmm
affecting my child's school community. So I was sort of drawn into all that, the reports with the Castle Booze and McKibben and all this stuff.
hmm
It
Lots
was
and lots of
overwhelming.
information.
Yeah, lots of information overload for sure. Um, so, I started tuning in to school committee meetings and things like that. And we all know what happened. Davis Thayer closed down. We were sort of inserted into Keller 2 months later. It was not a very impressive process, I will say. And, we thought we'd be settled for a little bit, and then the redistricting conversations continued to happen, right?
hmm
So, kind of where I live, I was constantly sort of on that fuzzy line. So,
Yes. Where was it
I
going to fall?
stopped, right? So, as a concerned parent, I didn't stop listening to the conversation, and in fact, I became more vocal as the conversations continued. And I wasn't impressed with some of the renditions of the redistricting that sort of transpired over the years. So I was a huge advocate for sort of that master redistricting plan.
hmm
And that is probably why I'm sitting here today, because I feel like I sort of pushed for that decision, and now that we're here, I want to have a role in sort of ensuring that it plays out the right way.
hmm Good. Thank you for that. Yes. And along the course of even that experience, I'm sure you're aware that certainly civil discourse is a key component of our form of government. Certainly on the national level, civil discourse has kind of disappeared. The divide is just atrocious. Fortunately, here in Franklin, at least for this biennial election, it's nonpartisan. There's no party associations. We're all neighbors. We're in it. We need to figure it out. So that's a little bit easier, but some of the discourse still needs to remain civil. So, what in your role and you as an individual would you be doing to help maintain that civil conversation?
It's such a great question, Steve. And I think, there's just tension everywhere right now. Um, I think what's most important is that we all remember that we're neighbors, and that we need to be respectful of one another. It doesn't matter if we agree, disagree. At the end of the day, we're all people doing our best, and we really need to meet each other where we're at and have fluid conversations, and just remember that we to share that mutual respect, no matter what our views are. When I hear things like parents in pickup lines arguing with teachers in front of their children, when, faculty members are just trying their best to usher kids in and out of the building as safely, as quickly as possible in a new process. We need to do better than that. We need to sometimes just step away from the situation. We all get frustrated. We all get frustrated. It's just how we handle that frustration, I think is important. And again, it just all comes back to that sort of mutual respect. And go home, write an email when you've calmed down. But I think we just need to do better in that sense. My third graders teacher sends us these lesson updates home every
Hmm.
week. And they're discussing virtues right now, and the two virtues that they're discussing are honesty and self-control. And I
Mm.
thought, wow, if we could all just go back to third grade and get a refresher lesson in honesty and self-control and just, those fundamental virtues, we'd all be better off. I think one of the things that just about every candidate has brought up is social media. Um,
Mm.
I have a love-hate relationship with social media. I think it can be such a good tool when used to put out agendas and, Franklin Matters interviews and, getting information out there, and sometimes even civil discourse. But so many times it just turns ugly and there are inflammatory comments and instigative comments. And, we just can't let us get to that point. We need to sit on our hands and get off our keyboards and remember that there's somebody on the other side of the screen, even though we can't
Mm.
see them. Um, and, I think also we need to look at, what causes tension, what triggers that and that frustration. And I think it's just the fact of, not feeling like you're heard,
Mm. Yeah.
not feeling like your opinion is being valued or taken into consideration. So I think we just need to, I personally, I don't want to ever shut anybody out. Everybody's opinion matters, and I don't want to make decisions, if I'm a school committee member, without other people's input.
Hmm.
I think I can't possibly know everything. I make mistakes. I think it's just really important for the community to have that, to feel like they can communicate and approach people and not have these barriers between us. So I think by keeping communication open and welcoming, we can hopefully bridge some of that gap.
Hmm. Yeah. No, thank you for that. I could go on forever on the social media part, but I won't. It's your time today.
Thanks.
So you've touched on it a little bit, perhaps, but what experience or background will help you serve in this particular role on the school committee? Or another way to phrase it, what do you bring to the table that potentially would set you apart from some of the other candidates, or at least enable you to collaborate, coordinate with whoever's going to be around that table going forward?
Yeah, so professionally, I went to business school. I have a finance degree. I spent over a decade in financial services. I won't bore you with the details, but I think that would probably come in handy during budget season.
Just a wee
Um,
bit.
I also own a small business. I'm an interior designer. And I think any small business owner will tell you that when you own a business, accountability is literally
Hmm.
everything. You always have to put your best foot forward when your reputation is at stake, or you won't be in business very long. I think I'd sort of take over that same mentality over to school committee is, I always want to put my best foot forward. But I also think it's important that you admit when you make mistakes. That's what builds
Mm.
trust. You
Right.
can't always make the right decisions, and acknowledging that is super important. I project manage daily between my profession and my kids.
Hmm.
I work with a variety of budgets. So I always appreciate the fact that sometimes you need to put your money somewhere so, where it matters most, and then sort of plan the process to where you can sort of budget things going forward to really achieve what you're looking for in that sort of end goal. I'm a creative thinker. I can't tell you how many times there's always something that goes wrong in my profession. You never know when there's going to be a pipe somewhere, or, and you have to think on the spot and you have to think
Mm,
quickly. I'm in people's homes. They can't live in this sort of limbo land. And, I think that happens so much in the schools is, this transportation issue, you need to jump on things and
hmm
prioritize. Um, I am a huge collaborator. Again, I'm talking to contractors and tradespeople and all of the moving parts and sort of having to compartmentalize and focus and prioritize all the time. Um, I personally, I have a middle schooler and I have my son's in elementary school, so I have sort of eyes
hmm
into both of those levels right
Sure.
now, which I
Yep.
think is helpful. I'm on soccer fields, baseball fields, at dance competitions. I'm constantly having conversations with people, which I think is important. Um, and I do have experience with, sort of the IEP and 504 process.
hmm
I've been through that. And because I've been following these discussions for years now,
hmm
admittedly, I have heard terms like hold harmless and out of district spending and,
Right.
all those sort of big words that maybe not everyone is familiar with. So, I think that sort part of the learning curve, I'm, sort of ahead of that.
Good. Yeah, I think that's one if and when candidates do come or potential candidates do come and say, what should I do? The first thing to do is just, watch meetings for about a year at a minimum, to find out what is indeed going on and then ask questions because, yeah, to your point, terminology is going to come up and well, what does that mean? What does that mean? And yeah, that I think
A
will
lot to
help
know.
you.
Yeah.
That
Sure.
that should help. You may still get some additional learning,
100%. 100%.
but
Yep.
that's going to be a good start. So, moving to the school committee questions specifically, as the redistricting decision at least is behind us, certainly there's a boatload of work left. Um, what do you see as one of the key priorities for the district?
Yeah, I mean, the redistricting is not over. I think we're just in the next phase of it, right?
Hmm
So all of this work has sort of gone into this planning, which is great. But I think now it's really important to sort of keep those lines of communication open
hmm
and with all the stakeholders, right? Like we should be having conversations with the teachers, and the students and the families and sort of understand how things are going and so that we can make tweaks where we need to, and sort of reassess and plan going forward. I think you know administration really did the best they could and there was so much work involved, but it's time to see how things play out
hmm
and provisions along the way. I think another thing that I think would be important is, other districts may have things that are working really well for them that maybe we're struggling with. So
hmm
why not open up conversations and talk to other districts and see what they're doing and areas that we might need to to do better in. I think keeping that conversation open as well. Um, Keeping the public informed, right? We
hmm
nobody likes surprises.
hmm
So, I love that there's school committee newsletters now, and Dave Callahan comes to the town council meetings and sort of does a debrief. I think just keeping the community in the know, whether it be just the schools or the town at large, is super important as we move forward, because we all know, many people they might like surprises, but really we have some issues with surprises often. So
hmm
taking that sort of out of the equation by just keeping people in the know whenever possible.
Yeah, and government sometimes it takes a while to do things. So you may hear bubble, 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 and all of a sudden now it becomes real, but then the people haven't paid attention. Then it becomes a surprise, and it's like, well, we've been talking about it for however long, pick a date. So, Yeah.
Yeah, and I'll also just add to that. I mean, the PCCs are going to do a really great job of this, but just building those internal communities now that we've sort
Hmm.
of separated into two and then the big middle school, I think it's really important that, we had such really strong communities before and we want to start rebuilding that. So I think, just working with the PCCs to make sure that that happens. It's the one piece that we really did not have when Davis Thayer closed down and we were sort of just brought into Helen
Mm.
Keller. And, I felt like it was really two separate communities for a while. So it's
Hmm.
definitely something that we need to do better this round.
Yeah. Agreed. Thank you for that. With the school district responsible for the largest portion of the town's budget, what are your ideas to help resolve this structural deficit? And you've already mentioned a couple of the key terms along the way, but it's one of the things that is a reality, and it doesn't unfortunately seem to be getting better as we go. So,
Yeah, I mean, first off, I want to point out that having sort of that biggest portion of the budget is the norm, not the not
hmm
the exception. Um, I think some of the things that we can do, like I love the idea that, the school committee was already sort of exploring with bringing the daycare over. Now we have ACDC over at Kennedy,
hmm
and exploring putting a daycare there. That's a great way to earn more revenue, which the town needs. I also was having a sort of a conversation with a parent who was saying how, solutions
hmm
is booked so quickly. I think they just open open up registration and it's
Right.
instantly booked. If we could explore possibly expanding solutions, another way to increase revenue,
hmm
just sort of that out of the box type of thinking is so important. There's been, that buzz conversation about exploring a sort of set allocation.
hmm
I think that is worth, having conversations with the finance committee and the business school administrator and seeing what that could look like. There was so much talk during both overrides about
hmm
how people are uncomfortable of, where that money goes that year after the override, and sort of getting dumped into just like a big bucket. And so perhaps if it's designated, to schools in a certain way,
hmm
I think we can avoid maybe that tug of war that always happens between the schools and the municipal departments. The other piece I will say is, I feel like I should be shouting from the rooftops on this, Steve, but I'm still hearing comments in the community that the schools need to be more efficient, right, in our budget planning. That is, in fact, what the schools have been doing for the last 2+ years in this whole restructuring, like really looking at all of the pieces and trying to do the best with what we know we have. And many teachers were sort of let go in this process of merging schools and such. And I think the community needs to understand that we saved the town $3 million off the bottom line. And so I'm really curious about those budget conversations this year to see,
hmm
that $3 million sort of goes forward. And unfortunately, we still took a $2 million hit on top of all of those efforts, which almost every family in this community has now been affected,
hmm
sometimes twice. And so, I think it's just important that the community understands and they know this. So yes, we're going to continue to look for ways we can increase revenue and always watching the budget and the bottom line. And maybe there are clubs that aren't being signed up for things in school that are aren't favored, and we can take away from those so we can add somewhere else. But
hmm
ultimately, the community really needs to come together and fix this together.
No doubt about that. Absolutely. I totally agree. It's our problem to solve. There's no, I think I said somewhere else, there's no silver night coming or whatever color night you want to call it. There's nothing on the horizon that's going to help us. It's going to be us. Because that hold harmless also at the state is going to be reevaluated. And at some point in time, they're going to make a decision around the Student Opportunity Act, which was revised, I think, in 2018, 2019, something in that time frame. And there's still inequities across the state. Respectfully, we're still getting more than we should as a community, and we just have not yet ponied up to do our fair share. That's the bottom line. Um, I understand the affordability of it totally. I'm on a retired income as well. I know that. But hold harmless and that formal solution going forward, those are going to be some big issues. So, yeah, it's going to be a challenge.
Absolutely.
Yes. So while we've covered a bunch of topics, if there's something else that we haven't covered that you'd like to address while we have the time and the opportunity,
Um,
you're open to do so.
I'll just say, I've been in Franklin for 12 years now. It's my home. It's my family's home. I'm passionate about this community. I'm really passionate about sort of paving the way for this generation of kids. I think we need to remember that these kids had experienced COVID, right?
Hmm.
They're already a little bit behind, and they've done a really great job of catching up to some degree. Um, but also this is their second redistricting,
Hmm.
and the world is in chaos. So I think, you know, I- I'm passionate about trying to ensure that these kids have the tools they need to not only survive, but thrive wherever they end up. And I think, I hope that I think the election is crucial. I think that people really need to pay attention to candidates and watch these interviews and get out there and ask questions and hear what they're saying, also hear what they're not saying.
Hmm.
And I'm happy to answer any questions if anybody wants to reach out. And really, I think we just need to come together and show up on November 4th.
Yep. On or before November 4th. It will also include in the video as we complete this a slide with your contact info so that people will be able to reach out through that channel with your email, phone number, etc., which is already public info through the town clerk's page anyway. So it's something that's part of you signed up for and you're willing to do based on what you've said. So yeah, that's all goodness. So thank you for taking time today to explain where you're coming from and what you're going to do for the school committee. Thank you, listeners, for tuning in. Stay tuned. There's going to be at least a few more of these as we kind of close out the process. And a quick reminder, we do this because Franklin matters.
This program was made possible by your Franklin friends and neighbors, good folks just like you. Thanks for supporting Franklin TV. And thanks for watching.